reflexes we have studied very well. So in visual reflexes, we are going to see introduction, definition, classification, the pathway, and the applied aspect related to it. So to begin with, what is the necessity of visual reflexes? They are the protective reflexes. These are the protective reflexes that are protecting our delicate structure which are present in the eye, that is required for the visual perception. And also these reflexes help us to see the things clearly even though there is a bright light or even though there is a moonlight. These reflexes are also known by another name, that is the pupillary reflexes. Why pupillary reflexes? Because all these visual reflexes, they are ultimately reflected and can be observed by observing the pupillary size. That's why ultimately these reflexes are also called as pupillary reflexes. So coming to the definition is the visual reflexes, they are the visceral reflexes as it is related to the eye. These are the visceral reflexes to the light and the accommodation, which alters the size of pupil. That's why they are known as pupillary reflexes. Coming to the classification of visual reflexes, the first major type is light reflex. In the light reflex, there are two subclassifications: direct light reflex and indirect or consensual light reflex. Second visual reflex is the accommodation reflex, and third is the ciliospinal reflex. As the name suggests, it is related to the spinal nerve and ciliary nerve. Coming to the very first, that is light reflex. It is simply when the light falls on the eyes, the pupil undergoes a change in the size reflexly. And this is in response to the change in the illumination. It is very simple. If you are sleeping in a dark room and suddenly someone put on the light, you may get discomfort initially. Why? Because there is a change in illumination. From darkness, there is a bright illumination. So ultimately it is being reflected into the change in the pupillary size. And this is nothing but light reflex. The benefit of light reflex is it helps in the dark adaptation and also it improves the depth of focus. That means it determines how much is the depth of the intention or intended object from your side. Third, it also controls or helpful in controlling the spherical or chromatic aberrations. If you remember this refractive error, the majority of spherical and chromatic aberrations, they are minimized or reduced by just constricting the pupil or reducing the size of pupil. So there are pupillary constrictor muscles. They are also called as sphincter muscles of pupil or sphincter pupillae. These are primarily innervated by parasympathetic nervous system. While there are pupillary dilator that cause the dilatation or widening of the pupil, it is purely innervated by sympathetic nervous system. So remember, parasympathetic is the constrictor here and the sympathetic, it is the dilator for the pupil. Coming to the first subclassification of light reflex, that is direct light reflex. The meaning of direct light reflex is that whenever you are showing the light to the particular eye, you have to observe the effect in the same eye. That is direct light reflex. So it means light is, if it is thrown to the right eye, you have to observe what is the change in the right eye. So, and what is indirect or consensual light reflex? The meaning is when the light is shown in the one eye, its effect is observed in the opposite eye. For example, if the right eye, it is being shown the light, so the effect is observed in the left eye instead of right eye. So that is indirect or consensual light reflex. The importance we have seen acuity, and the majority of the importance of this light reflex, it is particularly in the edema. particularly cerebral edema and the cerebral hemorrhage. That's why this clinical scenario, it is very much common in the casualty department. Whenever the patient enters into the casualty, the physician or doctor first used to check his light reflex, whether his brainstem is intact or not, or whether it is damaged. If it is damaged, these reflexes are diminished or absent. Now, the constriction of pupil to which light is shown, it is called as direct light reflex. We earlier discussed the light is shown to the right eye and the effect is observed in the same eye. While that of the other eye, it will be called as indirect or consensual light reflex. Again, light is shown to the right eye, but effect is observed in the left eye. That is indirect light reflex. So this is the broad pathway for the any of these light reflex, whether direct or indirect. So the afferent for this light reflex, it is the receptors in the retina. These receptors, they carry the inputs from the retina to the pretectal nucleus of the brainstem. This is the nucleus which is present in the brainstem. Now from pretectal nucleus, the information, it is conveyed to the Edinger-Westphal nucleus of the both side. There are two pretectal nucleus, there are two Edinger-Westphal nucleus. So from right pretectal nucleus, information goes to the right Edinger-Westphal as well as left Edinger-Westphal nucleus. This forms the internuncial fibers. This connection of the pretectal with Edinger nucleus, Edinger-Westphal, it forms internuncial fibers or interconnecting fiber, you can say. From the Edinger-Westphal nucleus, there is occurrence of or origin of efferent pathway. Efferent pathway from the Edinger-Westphal nucleus, which supplies to the sphincter pupillae of the eyeball or the pupil. So pathway for the pupillary light reflex, so afferent is originating from the retina. So the light receptors from the retina. From retina, this input, it is carried by the optic nerve. As you know, this optic nerve consists of temporal fiber and the nasal fiber. Later on, this optic nerve, it get crossed, particularly the temporal fiber are remaining on the same side, while the nasal fiber, they get crossed to the opposite side. So this occurs in the optic chiasma. So from the optic chiasma, the input is given to the again optic tract. Whatever remaining, that is the ipsilateral temporal fiber and the contralateral nasal fiber, it forms the optic tract. So from this optic tract, next should be coming the lateral geniculate body. But all fibers are not going to the lateral geniculate body. Instead, some fibers from this optic tract, they deviate from this pathway and they enter the brainstem, particularly to the pretectal nucleus. They go to the pretectal nucleus, and from the pretectal nucleus, the information is related to the Edinger-Westphal nucleus, which is forming the component of oculomotor nucleus, parasympathetic component of oculomotor nucleus. Now, efferent from this Edinger-Westphal nucleus, it is in the form of oculomotor nerve. That is third cranial nerve, isn't it? So this oculomotor nerve, it carries the output from this Edinger-Westphal nucleus. The signals are relayed in the form of nerve to the inferior oblique. From this nerve to the inferior oblique, the signals are relayed into the ciliary ganglion. If you remember, this ciliary ganglion, it is present behind the eyeball. And this is the parasympathetic ganglion. So this ciliary ganglion, from the ciliary ganglion, the information is relayed in the ciliary ganglion in the form of preganglionic fibers, and the postganglionic parasympathetic fiber, they take origin in the form of short ciliary nerve. And this short ciliary nerve, they supply the sphincter pupillae or constrictor pupillae and the ciliary muscle of the eyeball. So this is the pathway. In this diagram, you can see the left eye particularly, we have shown the light source, or we have shown the light to the left eye. Now pay proper attention. The light is being perceived by the receptors in the eyeball, left eyeball, isn't it? From the left eyeball, you can see the arrow marks. It is formed by the optic nerve. That is the nasal fiber and the temporal fiber. Now at the optic chiasma, the nasal fiber cross to the opposite side. You can clearly see the arrow is going towards the right side. And later it enters the pretectal nucleus on the right side. Now what about the left temporal fiber? That left temporal fiber, they remain uncrossed and they enter into the optic tract, isn't it? But some of these fiber from the optic tract, they do not go to the lateral geniculate body, that is LGB. While these fibers, they again enter the pretectal nucleus on the left side of the brainstem. So you can clearly see in this diagram, the left pretectal nucleus, it receives the input from the left eyeball. From this left pretectal nucleus, the information is relayed to the both Edinger-Westphal nucleus, which is forming the parasympathetic component of the third cranial nerve. So you can see from the pretectal nucleus of the right side, information is given to the both side, while again the same pretectal nucleus on the left side, information is relayed to the both Edinger-Westphal nucleus. Understood? Now this is all the afferent. Now there occurs the integration of this input in this Edinger-Westphal nucleus, and the efferent, it takes origin in the form of third cranial nerve, that is oculomotor nerve. So this oculomotor nerve, as you can see, there is a dashed line I have shown on the right side and on the left side. Consider right now only on the left side because light we have shown on the left side. So left oculomotor nerve, it carries the output from this Edinger-Westphal nucleus up to the parasympathetic ganglion of the eyeball, that is the ciliary ganglion, which is present exactly behind the eyeball. So they relay their output in this ciliary ganglion. So these fibers forms the preganglionic nerve fibers. So they relay their input output to this ciliary ganglion. From ciliary ganglion, you can see there is a short ciliary nerve which is taking origin, and this is supplying the sphincter pupillae of the same eye. So this forms the pathway for the direct light reflex. So whenever question is being asked, you have to draw and explain this pathway for the direct light reflex. Similar thing or similar pathway, it occurs on the right side when the right eye is being exposed for the light. Got it? So this is for the right direct light reflex. Again, the same pathway. This is a diagram from Guyton. So you can see from the pretectal nucleus in the brainstem, third cranial nerve nucleus, ciliary ganglion, and the sphincter pupillae. So coming to the functions of this light reflex, direct light reflex, these reflexes are meant to protect against the excessive bleaching of the visual pigments. Now you are very well aware about the bleaching reaction which occurs in the eyeball, isn't it? So it is the breakdown of the photopigment in relation to the light. So it protects excessive bleaching reaction. It also helps during light adaptation and the dark adaptation to maximize the visual acuity. So it helps us to sharpen our visual images. So this is the pathway for the right light reflex. So on the right side, you can see the right retina, second cranial nerve, that is optic nerve. Information is relayed in the brainstem, that is pretectal nucleus. From the right pretectal nucleus to the right Edinger-Westphal. And from right Edinger-Westphal, right third cranial nerve is there, which supplies the ciliary sphincter or sphincter pupillae. This is for the left eye. Left sided retina, left second cranial nerve, that is optic nerve, left pretectal nucleus, left Edinger-Westphal nucleus, left third cranial nerve, and the left ciliary sphincter. Now coming to the next light reflex, that is indirect or consensual light reflex. Now remember here, in the indirect or consensual, light is shown to the opposite eye. Got it? Or the light is shown in the one eye and the effect is observed in the opposite eye. In either way it is correct. So this indirect light reflex, where you can see again the same diagram which we have used for the direct light reflex. Now we have combined this diagram. So you can clearly see when the light is supposed, we have shown to the right eye. So from the right eye, right retina, right optic nerve, right pretectal nucleus. Now from the right pretectal nucleus, you can clearly see with the red green arrow, the information is related to the left Edinger-Westphal nucleus. Isn't it? From the left Edinger-Westphal, the output is created and it is sent via the oculomotor nerve, which is supplying the left ciliary sphincter. Number 7. Got it? So from number 4 and number 7, this forms the indirect or consensual light reflex. When the light is shown to the right eye, effect is observed in the left eye. Similar thing, now consider if the light is shown to the left eye. So number 1, then the pathway is getting transferred to at the point of left pretectal nucleus. Number 3, you can see the green arrow, number 3, which is giving its input to the right Edinger-Westphal nucleus. And from the right Edinger-Westphal nucleus, number 8, that is cranial nerve 3, that is oculomotor nerve, which is supplying the right ciliary sphincter muscles. So light is shown to the left eye and effect is observed in the right eye. So this is the pathway for the indirect or consensual indirect light reflex. So this is the pathway for direct light reflex again. Suppose light is shown to the left eye, left optic nerve, left optic nerve, then optic chiasma in common, left optic tract, left pretectal nucleus, from left pretectal nucleus to the left Edinger-Westphal nucleus of the left side, left oculomotor nerve, left ciliary ganglion, from left ciliary ganglion, left short ciliary nerve, which is supplying the constrictor pupilla of the left eye, and we are getting direct light reflex. Now regarding indirect light reflex, so you can see from the light is shown to the left eye, but from the left pretectal nucleus, input is given to the right Edinger-Westphal nucleus. Output is developed and these outputs are relayed into the right oculomotor nerve, from right oculomotor nerve, right ciliary ganglion, from the right ciliary ganglion, right short ciliary nerve, and from the right short ciliary nerve, the inputs are given to the right constrictor pupillae, where you will observe the consensual or indirect light reflex. So you need to draw either of these diagram for direct and indirect light reflex, but you have to explain in detail how the input is given to the variety of this nucleus. For direct, it is on the same side. For indirect, it is on the opposite side. Now coming to the accommodation reflex. So can anybody tell me what is accommodation? Nobody knows what is accommodation? अलंकृत बोलिए. अलंकृत गुप्ता, are you sleeping?
No, sir.
तो बोलिए, what is accommodation?
Sir, accommodation means adjustment, like a pupil will adjust according to the light.
Okay, good. So accommodation, it is the changing in the radius of curvature of the lens to focus the object of interest on the retina. Got it? That is the accommodation. So here we are going to change the curvature of lens. And how it is being done? It is by the way of accommodation. We are going to see what is the accommodation in detail. So this is the structure of the eyeball. You can see the cornea anterior surface, behind which there is iris. Then behind the iris, you can see the crystalline lens. This crystalline lens, it is being suspended by the suspensory ligament around 360 degree. Got it? So usually when we are at a resting position, when the eyeball or the eye gaze, it is fixed for the distant object. Beyond 6 meter, the crystalline lens, it is assumed a flat shape. It is assuming a flat shape. So this flat shape crystalline lens, it is being suspended 360 degree around by the suspensory ligament. So behind this suspensory ligament, you can see at the junction of cornea and scleral junction, you can see circular fibers which are occurring in a circular fashion. That's why they are appearing as just a drop-like structure on the both side. The below diagram, it is showing the anterior view of the same eyeball. You can see all around the suspensory ligament around 360 degree, and the central portion, it is formed by our crystalline lens. The importance of accommodation, it is because of the variety of the refractive power of the eyeball. So here I have shown the reduced eye, where all the refractive surfaces, they are algebraically added as a one, assuming that the lens is having only one structure, where we have added all the refractive indices of all the medias of the eye. So in the reduced eye, the total refractive power of human eyeball, it is 59 diopter. Got it? Now in this diagram, you can see the variety of the surfaces and the media I have shown having the different refractive indices. For consider air, it is having 1. For cornea, it is 1.38. For the aqueous humor, it is 1.33. For the lens, it is 1.40. For the vitreous humor, it is 1.34. So all these different surfaces have different refractive power. So when they are added algebraically, it is called a reduced eye. And in the reduced eye, you will get the total refractive power of the eye as 59 diopter. Now, what is the range of accommodation? The range of accommodation means up to which or up to what degree our eye can accommodate or our lens can accommodate. The amplitude up to which we can increase our accommodation from 0 to say 20 or 50. So that is the amplitude of accommodation. What are the changes that are observed during this accommodation? They can be remembered by the simple formula, that is, you have to remember just 3 C's for accommodation. Don't mention 3 C's. It is just for your remember how to remember this accommodation. So you have to include 3 C for accommodation. First C is the constriction of pupil. The first C amongst accommodation is the constriction. The pupillary size is reduces. The second C, it is the increased curvature of the lens. As we have seen or discussed, when the eyeball is at relaxed position, the crystalline lens, it is assume a flat shape. But when there is a process of accommodation occurs, the curvature, the flat curvature, it is getting increased in the form of convexity. So convexity occurs in the lens. So it is called as increased curvature of the lens. And the third C, it is called the convergence of the eyeball. It is called the convergence, means both eyeball, they come close together. Got it? So they converge the both eyeball together. So that is called the convergence. So this is the view for the distant vision, where you can see this crystalline lens, as we have discussed, it is flattened in shape, and the light waves which are coming from the distance, they are exactly focused on the fovea centralis, isn't it? This is at the relaxed state. But when the same eye, it is being allowed to focus for the near object. For example, try to extend your arm with a index finger only pointed, rest of the finger is making the fist, only index finger is out, and try to bring this index finger towards your nose. As soon as the index finger is coming close to your nose, you will find that try to focus your vision at the tip of your index finger. So you will find that you are getting your converging your eyeball close together. So that is one of the C. You are increasing your curvature of the lens. That is the second C. And gradually you will try to constrict your pupil. That is the third C. So these are the three C's for the accommodation. And that is how you can focus the near object very clearly and sharply on the fovea centralis. Without accommodation, you can't focus the object of interest sharply or clearly on the fovea, and the object appears to be blurred. Now coming to the pathway for the accommodation reflex, just pay attention, slightly trick is there. So whenever the light falls on the eyeball, there are the receptors in the retina, that is rods and cones. The input is received by your optic nerve. From the optic nerve, then come to the optic chiasma to the optic tract, from the optic tract to the lateral geniculate body, and the information is relayed up to the primary visual cortex, Brodmann's area number 17. Now up till here, you have to follow the visual pathway proper. From this visual cortex, the image appears to be blur. So whenever image is coming from the both eyeball, image is focused on your primary cortex, it finds that the image is not sharp, image is not clear. So it is sending this image and the input on the front side area, that is frontal eye field area number 8. You will find this area close to the premotor cortex or premotor area, where you will get frontal eye field area number 8 in the frontal cortex or a frontal lobe. Now this frontal eye field area, it sharpens the image. And how it sharpens? It sends the input to the Edinger-Westphal nucleus of the midbrain. Now just try to remember Edinger-Westphal nucleus, it is present in the brainstem. So the Edinger-Westphal nucleus on the both sides, it receives input from this frontal eye field area number 8. This Edinger-Westphal nucleus via the oculomotor nerves send input to the ciliary ganglion. From ciliary ganglion, postganglionic fiber in the form of short ciliary nerve arises, and it causes the constriction of ciliary muscle. Now once there is occurrence of constriction of ciliary muscle, as the ciliary muscle, they are encircling the lens surface, the anterior curvature of the lens, it is increased. The lens becomes more convex. So this is the first thing. Second, there occurs the contraction of constrictor pupillae of the eyeball. So the iris constrictor pupillae, it gets functional. So ultimately it is causing the constriction of pupil. That is the second C. And third, from the same third oculomotor nerve, the information is related to the medial rectus muscle. Now if you remember, the supply of medial rectus, it is by the third cranial nerve. So medial rectus on the both sides, they get activated. And what is the function of medial rectus? The medial rotation of the eyeball. So the eyeball get medially rotated. That is called the convergence of the eyeball. So that is the third C of this accommodation reflex. So for accommodation reflex, you have to write the pathway till up to the primary visual cortex, and from that you have to enter the frontal cortex via the frontal eye field area. Now again back to the Edinger-Westphal and till to the, and you have to end in it this pathway up to the eyeball and along with the medial rectus. So again the same pathway: eye, optic nerve, optic chiasma, optic tract, lateral geniculate body, optic radiation, and visual cortex, area number 17. From there, frontal eye field area number 8. From that, we have discussed Edinger-Westphal nucleus of the third cranial nerve, ciliary ganglion, short ciliary nerve, increased curvature of lens, constriction of pupil. Again from the frontal eye field area, by the Edinger-Westphal nucleus, somatic nucleus of the third cranial nerve, contraction of the medial rectus, and the convergence of the both eyeball. So that is the third C. So this is the pathway up to the visual cortex. It is okay, but this blue line or blue arrow, which is coming anteriorly at number 2. So at number 2, you will find the synapse at the frontal eye field area number 8. From frontal eye field area, again the inputs are relayed into the Edinger-Westphal nucleus. The pink line, which is coming to the Edinger-Westphal nucleus, it denotes the pathway for the light reflex. So there is meeting of this both light reflex and the indirect light reflex and this accommodation reflex at the Edinger-Westphal nucleus. And the green output in the form of 1 and 2, you will find oculomotor nerve supplying the ciliary ganglion and the further pathway till constriction of pupil and increased curvature of the lens. Now coming to the another part of this the reflexes, that is Purkinje-Sampson images. It can be asked as a viva. So these are the images which were discovered by two scientists, Purkinje and Sampson, when they have observed the different form of images form into the eyeball. So whenever the lit candle is being put in front of the eyeball, you will find the three images in the eye itself. The first image, it is formed by the anterior surface of the cornea. It is smaller and erect. The second image, it is again smaller than the first one, and again it is erect. It is formed by the anterior surface of the crystalline lens. While the third image, which is again smaller, but it is inverted, it is formed by the posterior surface of the lens. And these lens capsule and these images are called as Purkinje-Sampson images. Now coming to the ciliospinal reflex. In the ciliospinal reflex, just like a short procedure you have to observe. The procedure is that the subject is allowed to sit comfortably on the chair. You have to stand, suppose say on the right side, and you have to pinch over the nape of the neck. यानी just गले के ऊपर आपको you have to pinch करना है on the right side, and you have to observe the effect in the right eye. You have to observe the effect in the right eye, and what will be the observation? Whenever you are going to pinch on the right side, there is slight dilatation of the pupil on the right side. So this forms a particular pathway for this reflex. It is called as ciliospinal reflex, as it is the combination of the ciliary nerve and the spinal nerve. That's why it is called as ciliospinal reflex. So the reflex is like that. Whenever you are pinching, which sensation you will induce? Anybody? अगर आपने pinch किया nape of the neck को, कौन सा sensation आप induce करोगे subject में? Is it touch, pain or temperature?
Pain.
Yes?
Pain sensation.
Yes, correct. Yes, correct. So it is the pain sensation you are going to induce. So whenever you are pinching over the nape of the neck, that information of pain, it is carried by your tract, and this tract, it is going to up to the hypothalamus, where the information is relayed in the hypothalamus, pain pathway. Information is relayed in the hypothalamus, and this hypothalamus, it again sends a output in a downward fashion towards spinal cord. Again back to the spinal cord. Got it? At the spinal cord, these inputs are collected by upper thoracic segment of the spinal cord. Upper thoracic means T1 to T4 particularly. So this upper thoracic segment, they will collect the input which are coming from the hypothalamus, and they will be relaying their input via the cervical sympathetic ganglion into the superior cervical sympathetic ganglion. So you can see in this diagram, the inputs are being relayed into the superior cervical sympathetic ganglion. So these are the preganglionic fiber. Now the postganglionic fiber from this ganglion, it arises, and this postganglionic fiber, they get woven around a carotid artery in the form of carotid plexus. So there is a formation of carotid plexus around the carotid artery, and the inputs are given to the dilator pupillae of the eyeball. So this is the pathway for this ciliospinal reflex. So ultimately you can see there is an involvement of the spinal nerve and the ciliary nerve, which is supplying the dilator pupillae. And the nerve which is supplying the dilator pupillae, it is a long ciliary nerve. That's why it is a combination of spinal nerve and ciliary nerve. Hence it is called as ciliospinal reflex. It is a unilateral reflex. It is not bilateral reflex. So whatever side you are going to pinch, you have to observe the same side eye. If you are pinching on the right side, you have to observe the right eye. If you are pinching on the left side, you have to observe the left eye. So again, the same diagram, which is showing the hypothalamus in action. Output from hypothalamus via the upper thoracic segment, superior cervical sympathetic ganglion, then the plexus, carotid plexus around the internal carotid artery, and via the ophthalmic division of trigeminal nerve, which forms the long ciliary nerve, isn't it? Up till now we have seen the short ciliary nerve, but here it comes the role of long ciliary nerve, which supplies the dilator pupillae of the iris. Hence the eyeball or the iris get dilated. That means the aperture it widens. Just give me a few moments. Just wait. Slide has been stuck. Just wait. I have to upload the slide once again. So this is another diagram showing the same pathway. Ciliospinal reflex. Now coming to the applied aspect related to the visual reflex, the first applied aspect is Urgell-Robertson pupil. Just simply remember the name, that is short form of this ARP, Urgell-Robertson pupil. So what is that Urgell-Robertson pupil? In this case, there is a lesion in the Edinger-Westphal nucleus. You can simply imagine the pretectal nucleus. It is sending the input to the Edinger-Westphal nucleus of the third cranial nerve. So the output is being hampered, isn't it? So which pathway is affected? Can anybody tell me? The output from Edinger-Westphal nucleus is ample. So which reflex has been distorted or disturbed? Is it light reflex or is it motion reflex? Yes.
Light reflex.
Reflex.
Which reflex is disturbed?
Right.
Yes, correct. Light reflex.
Light reflex.
Yes, very good. So light reflex, it is absent in Urgell-Robertson pupil. So simply you can remember ARP, that means accommodation reflex present. It is that much simple. You can take Urgell A, Robertson R and pupil P. So accommodation reflex present in Urgell-Robertson pupil, while the light reflex is absent because Edinger-Westphal nucleus is at fault. And this is seen commonly in a neurosyphilis. So syphilis, it is a venereal disease or sexually transmitted disease. And in this disease, there is damage to the midbrain portion, particularly the third cranial nerve nucleus. So light reflex, it is absent in ARP or Urgell-Robertson pupil. Second applied aspect, it is very much common, which you might have studied in anatomy, that is Horner syndrome. Whenever there is damage to the, कब होता है Horner syndrome? Damage to the which plexus? No answer. Superior cervical nerve, sympathetic nerve, damage to the brachial plexus, सुना होगा तो. So whenever there is damage to the brachial plexus, ultimately it is damaging the cervical sympathetic nerve. So what are the clinical features? So it is a particular, that is a triad for Horner syndrome, ptosis, meiosis, exophthalmos, and in some cases you will find the anhydrosis. Ptosis means the upper eyelid, it droops down, Ramdev Baba, isn't it? Meiosis means constriction of pupil, the pupillary size get shortened. Exophthalmos, you are very well aware, exophthalmos, eyeball appear to be propped out. And the anhydrosis, it stands for absence of sweating on that same side. So these are the clinical features of this Horner syndrome whenever there is damage to the cervical sympathetic nerve. Next applied, it is presbyopia. It is an age-related disorder where there occurs a denaturation of crystalline lens protein, isn't it? Clinical features, presbyopia, age-related. The patient is unable to see the object clearly, and the accommodation, the amplitude and the degree, it is getting disturbed. So what is the treatment of presbyopia? Can anybody tell me what is the treatment?
Bifocal.
Yes, bifocal lens. The upper half portion of the lens, it is for the distant vision, and the lower portion of the glass, half portion, it is for the near vision. So bifocal lens is used. So to summarize this topic, we have seen the various light reflexes, direct light reflex and indirect light reflex, where we have seen the pathways. We have studied, then again in a direct, I am going to tell that you have to observe the effect on the same side of the eyeball, while in indirect you have to observe in the effect on the opposite side of the eyeball. So to check the effect, you have to put the cardboard in between while doing this light reflex. Always remember, whichever light reflex you are doing, you have to place the cardboard in between the eyeball, so that light should not travel directly to the opposite eyeball. So you place the cardboard in between and then you have to throw the light in a particular eye. Regarding accommodation reflex, ask the subject to look at a distant object and with a flash of light, ask him to focus on the near object. So you will find the convergence of the eyeball and reduction in pupillary size. While the third C of this accommodation reflex, it can't be looked from the exterior because you cannot see the crystalline lens, that surface is being increased or become more convex. But you can clearly demarcate two C's of this accommodation, that is convergence of the eyeball and constriction of the pupil. Now third, ciliospinal reflex. pinch the neck of the neck and observe the effect in the same eye, where you will find the dilatation of the, that is pupillary dilatation is observed. In applied, ARP stands for Alger-Robertson pupil, where light reflex is absent when there is damage to the Edinger-Westphal nucleus. In the Horner syndrome, damage to the cervical sympathetic ganglion, and is the presbyopia, that is the denaturation of the crystalline lens. So that's all. We have revised all about the visual reflexes and its pathway. This is the very favorite question in any of the exam, either consider university exam or the prelims exam. So in that case, you have to write everything along with the proper diagram of the pathway. Is it clear? Do you have any query or doubt regarding the visual reflexes? ऐसा कोई पोर्शन है जो आपको समझा नहीं है? Students, everything understood? If you have any doubt or question, the WhatsApp